This is my podcast for the Language Training for Global English seminar. My name is Nicole, and the topic of my podcast is the differences of ESL teaching between adults and children. I'm quickly going to show you the table of content. ESL, English as a Second Language. Children and adult learners. Teaching kids. Teaching adults. Comparison, conclusion, always remember, bibliography, and bibliography 2. For this podcast, I decided to focus on beginners. So, the children and adults I am talking about have none or very little knowledge of English. Additionally, there's important to know that with children I mean kids in primary and secondary school. Let's start with the interesting part now. ESL. So first I'm going to explain to you what ESL or English as a Second Language is. English as a second language is a term for the study of the English language by non-native speakers. Commonly, those speakers live in an English-speaking environment. That environment may be a country in which English is the mother tongue, for example, England or Australia, or it might be a country in which English has an established role, like for example, India or Nigeria. My focus lies on what a teacher should be aware of when teaching adults or children in an ESL country. I will also point out the differences of adult and non-adult learners and what the most effective ways of teaching for either of them are. Children and adult learners. No matter what age group you're teaching, it helps to understand the different stages of language learning that happen throughout life. The best time for children to acquire new languages is up until their adolescence. Pronunciation comes easier, and vocabulary can be remembered more easily during this time. Adults, on the other hand, will have more varying levels and difficulties. Around puberty, the natural ability to pick up a second language drops and continues to do so as we get older. If you're teaching adults who are absolute beginners and have no previous experience or exposure to English, this can be a big challenge for them. Alan Rogers mentions in his book, Teaching Adults, general characteristics of adult learners. For example, they bring with them a package of experience and values. They come to education with intentions. They bring expectations about the learning process. They already have their own set of patterns of learning. Of course, this can differ from class to class, but you should always keep these points in mind when preparing lectures. On the other hand, there are the basic principles how children learn a foreign language from Legutke, Müller-Hartmann, and Schocker von Ditfurth in Teaching English in the Primary School. I'm going to introduce some of them to you now. First, you should be aware of that kids do not necessarily learn what teachers teach. There is an asymmetrical relationship between teaching and learning. But if children want to communicate something, they use whatever resources they have and actively construct meaning to get their message across. Secondly, learning a language is primarily motivated by communicating personal meanings. Last but not least, there is no simple transfer of classroom learning to using the foreign language in real life. Something really relevant you shouldn't forget about are the different learner types. Har, Hall, Shep, and Smith explain it in How Teachers Teach to Students with Different Learning Styles, like this. Learning styles are individual differences in the way information is perceived, processed, and communicated. This means that every person, no matter if adult or not, has a favorite learning style. This learning style is the fastest and easiest way for him or her to learn a new language. Another important point to be aware of is to include age-appropriate materials in your classes. For example, children are not going to be interested in reading articles about the economy or even the presidential elections. In fact, most kids generally won't like reading articles at all. Other techniques need to be employed, and this is exactly what I'm going to continue with. Teaching kids. Children need to make sense of what they learn in the classroom. They're more engaged when they're interested in a topic or if they can use it in everyday life. So therefore, use appropriate materials, such as games or songs. Let them name furniture in English with postage stickers, or let them create posters presenting their families. A CD or a film allows the children to improve their listening skills. Choose topics like family, food, or favorite professions. Young children learn English just as they learn their native language, through experience and interaction. They aren't consciously studying structure and grammar rules, so keep your corrections natural. If they make mistakes, just repeat the correct sentence. Otherwise, they could get too scared of making errors. Storytelling is another effective technique. Most of the children love story time. Find a simple fairy tale to tell the children, or you can even make one up yourself. Afterwards, ask questions about the story or let them invent their own stories. This can be incredibly beneficial in terms of their production skills. But you have to be careful. Children tend to have short attention spans. Long exercises, which involve a lot of silence, will not work. The kids will become agitated and lose interest. Keep them engaged at all times. Posing questions, getting everyone involved in the exercise, and generally keeping them on their toes is always a good idea. Or you can simply let them move and stretch for a couple of minutes. Let's continue with teaching adults. Keeping adults engaged is just as important as doing so with children. You might find that there are some students who are intent on learning and will do their best to concentrate. This may not always be the case. Therefore, it is important to keep the class as interesting as possible. There are many reasons why adults want to learn English. In an ESL country, it's probably everyday language they want to learn. But it might also be possible that your students need English for business. Make sure you know their goals to adapt your lessons. Otherwise, your students could get demotivated and lose interest. Use age-appropriate activities. This plays into the point I mentioned before. Plan your lessons relevant to their lives. Like, for example, how to fill out a job application, how to prepare for a citizenship test, or you can practice interview questions for a new job. Debates are often a great way to get adults talking. It takes away the fear of talking in a foreign language once they started to debate about interesting topics. Not only children like them, games are also a good option for adults. More grown-up type games will be useful in this regard. Like, for example, Hangman, Pictionary, or Simon Says. If your student is struggling to understand something that you think is a simple concept, make sure you're responding with patience and respect. Your tone, body language, and actions will all reveal your attitude. Students pick up on this, no matter how little English they know. Remember, learning English is just one part of their life, and they might be well-established professionals in their home countries. Dan Spalding argues in his book How to Teach Adults that in order to maximize student learning, teachers must make students uncomfortable. The job of the teacher is to create a supportive environment that invites students to attempt new challenges and learn from them. It is also a good idea to have a sense of humor. It makes learning fun. They're probably going to remember words of a joke easier. Adults, in contrast to children, need constant feedback in order to keep them motivated. Be sure to give detailed and encouraging feedback as well as suggestions for improvement. This is a comparison of children and adult learners I found from the Virginia Adult Learning Resource Center. It summarizes some of the important points you should keep in mind when teaching. Like, for example, adults have, in contrast to children, a lifetime of experience. Children, on the other hand, are open to learn new information. They're adaptable and tend to learn quickly. Kids learn because they are told to. Adults often have specific goals. They come from diverse age and backgrounds and as a group possess uneven skills and education levels. As Legutke, Müller-Hartmann, and Schocker von Ditfurth say in their book, learning a foreign language is an extremely complex process in many ways. This complexity makes language learning difficult to research. That's because there are a lot of factors playing an important role when teaching a language. The questions the teacher should ask her or himself are, for example, what's the mother tongue or the background of your students? Have they learned another language before? What do they want to use the language for? What are their goals? Especially in adult classes, there's a great diversity, and often their language skills are not on the same level. As Stefan Brookfield mentions in his book, Powerful Techniques for Teaching Adults, cultural tradition, class membership, racial identity, learning style, personality type, developmental stage, models of cognitive processing, previous experiences, people's particular brain chemistry, current ability level, readiness for learning. All these represent a bewildering set of learner characteristics. Remember, most adults will also like to take a logical approach, but overall with both children and older students, using the language in a practical way is the most beneficial method. Games. Both adults and children love games. Therefore, it is important to include these as much as possible in the class. By doing this, the teacher will be able to let words sink in easier. Learning can be fun. That's what you have to show your students. Every age group processes new languages in a completely different way. Once you understand these differences, it'll be much easier to adapt your lesson plan to fit the needs of your students. All in all, it can be said that there are different learner types and each student has a favorite learning style, which doesn't depend on the student's age. This learning style might be auditory, visual, or something else. As a teacher, you can't plan a lesson which is perfect for each and every student. Especially adults have already established their personal learning styles. Just make sure that you create diversified lessons and make them fun. This way, all the students can benefit somehow. There are some points that are different between children and adult learners, as I mentioned before. Like, for example, the ability to pick up a new language, or how you should give them feedback, or the material you use, and, of course, the attention spans. But no matter what age group you're teaching, you can never go wrong with a solid lesson plan, patience, and an understanding of your students' goals and needs. Take your job seriously, and your students will too. Be passionate about what you do. Don't forget to smile. Be flexible if things don't work out the way you expected them to. A really important point is that you speak English and don't switch to your mother tongue. Encourage your students to ask questions and, most importantly, have fun. With these tips, I'm going to end this podcast and you should be ready to teach children and adults effectively and in an interesting way. If you want to know more about this topic, please take a look at my bibliography. Thank you.